The morning began, just like countless others, in Claire's quiet suburban home. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden hue through the white curtains of the living room. Outside, the neighborhood still slept. Inside, however, life had already begun to stir. Claire moved through the house with practiced ease, one hand holding her lukewarm coffee, the other gently bouncing her 6-month-old daughter, Lily, on her hip. Lily was wide-eyed and giggling, fascinated by everything: the crinkle of her blanket, the swish of her mom's ponytail, the wagging tail of the large German Shepherd watching nearby. Max, the family's 5-year-old German Shepherd, sat near the edge of the living room rug. His dark eyes followed Claire and Lily calmly, ears perked, tail thumping lightly on the floor. He had been part of the family long before Lily came along. A rescue dog with a past no one fully knew, Max had always been loyal, alert, and fiercely intelligent. Still, Claire had always been a little cautious. She didn't mistrust Max. In fact, she'd always believed he had a good heart. But Lily was fragile: tiny fingers, soft skin, the unpredictable jerks and squeals of a baby still learning the world. Max was nearly 90 pounds of pure muscle. Gentle or not, he was strong. Too strong. So Claire kept boundaries. Max could be near, but never too near. Always under supervision. Always with a buffer. Still, there were moments that chipped away at that fear. Like the time Lily dropped her rattle and Max nosed it gently back toward her. Or when he instinctively placed himself between her stroller and the road during a walk. Claire noticed these things. She felt them. But old instincts are hard to shake. She'd grown up being told never to fully trust dogs around babies. And now that she was a mother, those warnings echoed louder. That morning, though something was different, Claire was tired more than usual. The night before had been a series of short naps, diaper changes, and teething fuss. As she laid Lily down in her playpen, she sighed, already counting the hours until bedtime. Max settled on the floor nearby, positioning himself so he had a clear line of sight to the playpen. His head rested on his paws, his eyes still watching. Claire crouched down and looked Max in the eyes. "Watch her for a second, okay?" she said, half laughing, fully not serious. He blinked slowly, as if acknowledging her command. She stood up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing the laundry basket. The dryer buzzer had gone off nearly half an hour earlier. She hated letting clothes sit in the dryer too long. They came out wrinkled. And that meant more ironing, which she had no energy for. She'd only be gone for a couple of minutes. 3, tops. Still, she hesitated at the top of the basement stairs. She turned and peeked back into the living room. Lily was lying on her back, cooing at a hanging toy. Max hadn't moved an inch. He looked as though he were carved from stone, eyes fixed on Lily, every muscle relaxed yet ready. Claire took a breath. "Just 5 minutes," she said aloud. More to reassure herself than anything else. She stepped into the basement and closed the door behind her gently. The familiar click echoing in her mind a little too loudly. Downstairs, as the hum of the dryer faded and the scent of warm cotton filled the air, Claire tried to focus. She folded clothes mechanically, but her thoughts stayed upstairs. Max was good. Lily was fine. Still, the silence tugged at her nerves. She stopped folding mid-shirt. Something about the quiet didn't sit right. Claire stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, holding a half-folded towel in her hands. The air was warm from the dryer, and the scent of clean laundry usually brought a strange kind of comfort. But now it felt oddly out of place, like background music playing during a scene where something important was happening just out of frame. Tried to shake the feeling. "She's fine," Claire whispered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone who could hear. She had only been gone for a minute or two. Lily was probably still swatting at the plush giraffe hanging above her playpen, and Max, good solid Max, was probably still lying nearby, guarding her like always. Still, her fingers fumbled with the fabric as she folded another onesie. She couldn't deny the unease that had crept in. Claire had always been the kind of mother who checked twice. Baby monitor turned on. Check. Outlets covered. Check. Pet gates locked. Check. She wasn't a helicopter parent, but she was careful. She believed in instincts, especially the quiet ones. The little whispers that told you when something wasn't quite right. But today had been different. She hadn't planned to leave them alone. Not exactly. It had just happened. One moment she was watching Lily coo and Max nap, and the next she was thinking about wrinkles in the laundry and how many chores were waiting. She figured it would be harmless. Just a few minutes. She remembered how Max had looked up at her when she joked, "Watch her for a second." It had felt like a throwaway comment. But now, thinking back, there had been something in his gaze. As if he understood. A loud thump overhead broke her thoughts. Claire's heart jolted. It wasn't a crash. Not something falling hard. But enough to make her freeze. The kind of sound that wasn't loud in volume, but loud in meaning. Her instincts flared. The laundry fell from her arms. She moved, taking the stairs 2 at a time. She barely noticed how fast her legs were moving. Her sock caught slightly on the wooden step, but she didn't stop. She grabbed the doorknob at the top, turned it fast, and swung the door open. The house was quiet again. That same, deep, eerie kind of silence that doesn't belong in a home. With a baby, Claire's eyes locked on the playpen, but Lily wasn't lying on her back anymore. The soft toys were pushed to the side, and Max was nowhere in sight. She stepped into the room, heart pounding now, mouth dry. Her breath caught in her throat as she rounded the edge of the couch, ready to call out Max's name, ready to rush forward, ready for anything. And then she saw it. Max was inside the playpen, not beside it, not leaning over it, inside, somehow. The large shepherd had climbed over the playpen rail with his powerful body and landed without knocking it over. He was lying on his side, his thick fur, a contrast against the pale colors of the baby's blankets. And nestled beside him, her head resting gently on his shoulder, was Lily. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even awake. She was fast asleep. Claire didn't move. Her breath returned, slow and careful, like it might startle the moment if she let it out too fast. Max's eyes opened and met hers. He didn't rise. He didn't flinch. He just blinked slowly, as if to say, she's safe. For a moment, the world stopped turning. No buzzing dryer. No to-do list. Just the surreal image in front of her, a baby and a dog, curled up together like they'd done this 100 times. Claire stepped back, gently leaning against the wall, a hand over her mouth. She had only meant to be gone for 5 minutes. But what she walked in on was something no rulebook, no parenting blog, no cautious whisper could have prepared her for. It was the beginning of something she never expected, and she had no words for it, just awe. Claire stood motionless, one hand gripping the wall behind her for balance, the other still hovering near her chest where she'd instinctively placed it seconds ago. Her eyes remained locked on the surreal sight before her. Lily curled up against Max's side, sleeping soundly, with the shepherd's tail wrapped loosely around her legs. Like a protective barrier, the silence that filled the room didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, thick, not the kind of quiet that made you feel relaxed, but the kind that made you listen harder, question deeper, hesitate longer. And yet, it wasn't bad. It wasn't threatening. It was just unexpected. Moments earlier, Claire had been downstairs, worrying that she had made a mistake, had trusted too soon, left her baby too unguarded. The idea that something could have gone wrong had clung to her like a shadow. But now, faced with this impossible scene, that fear began to shift. It didn't disappear completely, it simply changed shape. She took a quiet step forward, unsure of whether to speak or just keep watching. The playpen, designed for safety and confinement, now looked like a cradle of connection. Max remained perfectly still, eyes tracking Claire calmly, ears slightly back, not out of guilt, but attentiveness. He was waiting for her reaction, her permission, her approval. Claire knelt down slowly beside the playpen, resting her arms on the rail as she peered inside. Lily's breathing was soft and even. One of her tiny fists was still lightly tangled in the fur around Max's neck. Her pacifier had fallen to the side, completely forgotten. Max's head was tilted slightly toward her, muzzle close enough to feel each of her exhaled breaths. Claire stared at them both, unsure how to process what she was seeing. She wasn't angry, not at all, but she was overwhelmed. This wasn't in any parenting book she had read. This wasn't something you prepare for when you bring home a baby or when you trust a rescue dog with a mysterious past. And yet, here they were, perfectly still, perfectly trusting. The strangest part was that Max didn't look proud or pleased with himself. He didn't look like a dog who had done something mischievous or brave. He looked like he belonged there, like he had known all along what to do. But Claire felt her throat tighten. How many moments like this had she almost missed? How many times had she overthought, overprotected, overstepped, when all Max had ever wanted to do was be near the little human who had suddenly joined his world? Her hand reached into the playpen, gently brushing a stray hair from Lily's forehead. The baby stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Max's eyes flicked toward Claire's hand, then back to Lily. He didn't move. It was trust. Deep, unspoken trust, not just between Max and Lily, but between Claire and Max, too. The kind that doesn't happen overnight. The kind that's built quietly, through moments like this. Moments you don't plan. Moments you almost miss. She sat back and just watched her daughter sleeping peacefully against the broad, warm body of the dog she had once sworn would never be allowed that close. Watched as her own fears melted into something new, something softer, deeper. Gratitude. Respect. Love. It was then, in the middle of that silence, that Claire understood. This wasn't just a one-time event. It wasn't a funny story to tell later or a cute picture for social media. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a bond that had already formed when she wasn't looking, and a reminder that sometimes, silence isn't empty. Sometimes, silence is sacred. Claire sat on the floor for several minutes, just watching. She couldn't bring herself to break the moment. Not yet. There was a tenderness in the air that felt too fragile to disturb. She feared that even the creak of the hardwood floor might dissolve it like mist. Max hadn't moved a muscle. He remained inside the playpen, his breathing steady and controlled. It was almost unnatural how still he was, as if he somehow understood that his very presence near Lily required the utmost care. He lay in a position that made himself smaller, less threatening, almost submissive but still protective. Lily, oblivious to the miracle beside her, remained fast asleep, her hand still resting on the ridge of his shoulder. Claire's thoughts raced. How had he even managed to climb, and without making noise? The playpen wasn't short. There were no stools or furniture nearby that could have helped. Max must have leaped gently, landed softly, and placed himself beside Lily with deliberate caution. She'd seen him jump before across creeks, over fallen trees on trails, but never this carefully. Never with such grace. And why had he done it? Was Lily fussing? Did she cry? Had she needed comfort? And he responded. There had been no sound, no whimper, just a thump, a soft one, like paws landing. And then the silence, not an eerie silence, a chosen one. Claire blinked, fighting the sudden sting in her eyes. This dog, this misunderstood, judged, and cautious dog, had done something she couldn't have expected in 100 years. He hadn't just been watching Lily, he had joined her, entered her world on her level, on her terms. It was as if he'd been waiting for permission that never came, and when he sensed it wouldn't, he gave it to himself. And it wasn't reckless, it was intentional. Claire finally reached for her phone on the coffee table. Her fingers moved slowly, unsure if the click of the camera would shatter the scene. She took one photo, then another, careful to silence the shutter sound. She knew the pictures couldn't do it justice, but she had to capture something. Proof, a memory, a reminder. As she looked at the screen, the image nearly took her breath away. Lily, so small and peaceful, nestled against Max's massive form, her pale onesie contrasting with his sable fur, her fragile body completely unafraid. The way Max's head rested beside her, his eyes half closed in contentment. It didn't look posed. It looked right. Claire whispered. You knew. Max opened his eyes a bit more and looked at her, not with guilt, not with worry, with calm, as if to say, she needed someone, so I became that someone. She reached forward and gently touched his paw. Good boy, she said, her voice cracking. He didn't move, just let her hold that moment with him. Claire realized she wasn't just witnessing a bond form, she was witnessing the moment Max fully stepped into a new role, not just as a dog in the family, but something far deeper, a silent guardian, a brother in fur, a protector who didn't need to be told what to do, he simply knew, and perhaps most importantly, he'd waited for the right moment to show her. Claire leaned her head back against the couch, closed her eyes briefly, and breathed. Something profound had shifted. In her, in Max Dimdo, in the home itself. The line she'd drawn between safe distance and too close had quietly vanished. Because sometimes, the heart doesn't ask for permission, it just knows where it belongs. The days that followed were quieter, not in the sense of silence, but in energy. Something in the house had shifted. Claire noticed it first in Max. He walked with a new calmness. No longer pacing nervously when Lily cried or hovering by the door when Claire left the room. It was as if, after that moment in the playpen, he had been handed a role and he accepted it without question. The guardian. The gentle giant. The one who would be there when Claire couldn't be. For the first time since Lily was born, Claire felt like she wasn't alone. Max followed her a little less now. Instead, he lingered wherever Lily was, whether she was lying on a playmat or strapped into her bouncer. He never crowded her, never forced closeness. He simply stayed nearby, present and watchful. Claire began testing the boundaries she once held firm. She let Lily nap in her crib while Max rested beneath it. She watched, cautiously at first, as Lily reached out to tug at his ear or grab his tail. And every single time, Max would just blink patiently and let her explore. He never growled, never flinched. He let her be curious. And more importantly, he let her feel safe. One morning, as Claire prepared Lily's bottle in the kitchen, she peeked into the living room and saw Max lying on the floor, nose to nose with Lily. She was giggling, arms waving, clearly delighted. Max didn't move, he just stared back, letting her babble and bounce with wild energy. Claire stood there for a moment, completely still, holding the bottle in midair. She felt something rise in her chest, something deep and unspoken. Trust. It wasn't just her trusting Max now, it was Max trusting her, too, that she understood the weight of what was happening, that she wouldn't pull back in fear or keep him at a distance, that she saw him not just as a pet, but as something more, a silent partner in raising this little human. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house took on that golden, almost magical light, Claire sat cross-legged on the rug with Lily in her lap. Max lay beside them, his head resting gently on her knee. Lily was chewing on a soft heather, her eyes blinking slowly as she began to fade into sleep. Claire stroked Max's fur absently, marveling at the peace that had settled in. I didn't know it would be like this, she whispered. Max's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. I was scared, you know, when I brought her home. I didn't know if you'd understand, if it would be too much, if I could handle it all. Max blinked, as if hearing every word. But you made it easier. There was no dramatic music, no fireworks, just the quiet warmth of a family that had grown in a way no one had expected, a bond that hadn't been trained or taught. It had emerged on its own, in its own time. That night, Claire left Lily's nursery door open, not wide, but just enough. Enough for Max to nudge it with his nose if he wanted, enough to let trust breathe, and sure enough, hours later, when the house was dark and still, Claire stepped into the hallway and saw him there, lying just outside. Lily's door, not inside, not to close, just enough to listen, enough to protect, enough to love her, in his own quiet way. The summer storm came without warning. One moment, the skies were a pale blue, calm and clear. The next, they turned a brooding gray, rumbling in the distance like a giant awakening. Claire was in the kitchen folding laundry when the first boom of thunder rattled the windows. She jumped slightly, then glanced at the clock. Lily's nap time. She moved quickly toward the nursery. It wasn't the thunder that worried her, it was the way Lily often reacted to sudden, loud noises. She hated them. They startled her into tears almost every time, and once she was scared, it was nearly impossible to soothe her. Claire tiptoed down the hallway, already hearing the faint whimpering starting to build from Lily's room. But when she pushed open the door, what she saw made her pause. Max was already there, not pacing, not whining, just sitting beside the crib, ears flicking at every thunderclap, eyes fixed on Lily, who had stopped crying and was instead blinking up at him. Through the slats of the crib rail, Claire stepped in slowly. Lily's little fingers were wrapped tightly around the corner of her blanket. Her bottom lip still quivered slightly, but the fear hadn't taken over like it usually did. Max leaned his head closer to the crib, letting out a low, soothing chuff of air, as if offering comfort in his own quiet language. Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. Something was happening here, something fragile and real. As the storm deepened, rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rolled louder overhead. The lights flickered once. Claire's heart skipped. Power outages were common during summer storms. And with a baby in the house, any kind of outage could become stressful fast. No monitors. No white noise, no bottle warmer. Sure enough, the lights flickered again, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Lily whimpered, just once. Claire moved toward the crib. But Max was faster, not in panic, not in fear, in purpose. He stood and gently placed both front paws on the side of the crib, just enough to lift his head higher. His face was close to Lily's now, so close she could see his eyes and feel his breath. She reached out and touched his nose, and Claire heard it, that small, surprised giggle. Even in the dark, a flashlight flickered on in Claire's hand. She swept the soft beam across the room, and there it was. Lily, wide-eyed but calm. Max, alert but grounded. It was the storm that had brought fear, but it was trust that had kept it at bay. Claire sank down into the rocking chair in the corner of the room, the beam of the flashlight resting low on the floor now, casting long shadows across the walls. She watched as Max sat beside the crib once more, positioning himself like a statue on guard. The storm raged outside, but inside, something stronger held firm. Not electricity, not noise machines, but connection. Claire thought about everything she had worried about just a few weeks ago. About Max's strength, his unpredictability, his size, about all the reasons people caution against having large dogs around babies. But none of those things had mattered when the thunder cracked, because when fear came knocking, Max hadn't barked. He had shown up without needing to be told, without waiting for permission. He had simply been there, and somehow Lily had known to trust him. Claire sat there long after the storm had passed, flashlight growing dim, house humming with silence again. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't document the moment. She just lived in it, because some moments don't need to be captured to be remembered. They live in the heart. The next morning dawned with a soft golden light, as if the storm had taken the weight of the past with it and left behind something cleaner, lighter. The house was still, peaceful. Claire stood by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. Drops of rain still clung to the glass, but the sky was clear now. Calm had returned. Behind her, Max lay stretched out on the living room rug, his chin resting between his paws, his eyes following every movement Lily made. She had recently learned to scoot, her wobbly crawl not quite graceful but determined. And Max, ever patient, remained still as she bumped into his side and tugged on his fur. He didn't flinch, not once. Instead, he let her climb over his legs, babble nonsense into his ear, and chew lightly on his tail like it was just another toy. Claire watched them with a heart full of wonder. This wasn't just a friendship anymore, it was a rhythm. Each day brought a new moment that solidified the trust between them. When Lily dropped her snack on the floor, Max didn't race to steal. He waited, watching her curiously. When she fell over and let out a frustrated cry, he was the first one beside her. No barking, no panic, just quiet concern. One afternoon, Claire laid a blanket out in the backyard under the shade of the big oak tree. It was warm, but not too hot, a perfect day to be outside. She brought Lily out, her favorite board books in hand, and watched as Max followed close behind, nose to the breeze, tail swaying gently. The backyard had always been Max's space, his retreat, but now, he seemed content to share it. Claire placed Lily in the middle of the blanket, then sat beside her. Max lay down just off the edge, close enough to touch, far enough not to crowd. For nearly an hour, the three of them sat, under the tree, the baby babbling to herself while Max dozed lightly, and Claire just breathed. It struck her then. How far they'd come. It hadn't been that long ago, she was keeping a baby gate between Max and Lily, not because she didn't love him, but because she feared what she couldn't predict. She was a new mom, trying to do everything right, overwhelmed by voices telling her to be cautious, to be careful, to never assume an animal could understand the delicate world of a child. But Max had understood better than anyone. He didn't need to be trained to love her. He had chosen to. That evening, as Claire rocked Lily to sleep, she looked down at her daughter's sleepy eyes and tiny fingers clinging to her shirt. She remembered the first night they brought her home, the fear, the exhaustion, the feeling of not knowing if she could do it all. And now, this piece. Max waited just outside the door. As always, his silhouette visible in the hall light. Claire stepped out gently and knelt beside him, her hand brushing through his fur. "You're her safe place," she whispered. "And somehow, mine too." Max pressed his head gently into her chest, just for a moment, then pulled away, returning to his spot by the nursery door. He didn't ask for affection, he didn't demand acknowledgement, he just showed up, every time, and in doing so, he became something far more than Claire ever imagined. When she brought him home from the shelter all those years ago, he became family. A few months later, the leaves began to change. The crisp air of early autumn settled over the town, and with it came a sense of reflection. Life had fallen into a rhythm, a beautiful, quiet one woven between the daily routines of bottles and baby giggles, backyard naps, and soft footsteps trailing behind. Claire often found herself pausing mid-task just to watch them. Lily and Max. Together, they moved like a pair that had always existed. Not something she could have planned, not something she could have forced, just something that was. But one morning, everything changed again. Not in a dramatic way, not with sirens or tears or fear. It changed with a step, a small one. Lily had been standing for weeks now, holding onto furniture, pulling herself upright with determination. Claire and Max always cheered her on. Claire with excited claps, Max with gentle tail wags. That day, Claire was sitting on the rug, camera in hand, ready to capture another milestone attempt. Lily stood up, wobbled slightly, then steadied herself. By pressing a hand against Max's side, he was sitting beside her, calm and unmoving, as if he knew she needed his balance. Then, without warning, no coaxing, no prompting, Lily let go. And took one tiny step, then another, right into Max. She giggled wildly, grabbing onto his fur to keep herself upright. Max didn't move, didn't flinch. He just looked down at her, tongue lolling out slightly, his body steady like an anchor. Claire dropped the phone. Her hand flew to her mouth. She blinked, half in disbelief and half in joy. Lily had just taken her very first steps toward him. Not her, not the toy across the room, not the couch. Tim. Claire single quotes. His eyes filled instantly. She reached for her phone again and caught Lily falling into a soft sit. Max leaning down to give her a gentle nudge of approval. Of all the moments they'd shared, this one felt the most sacred. Later that night, Claire sat alone in the nursery. Lily was asleep, her soft breaths rising and falling beneath the dim glow of the nightlight. Max lay in his usual spot by the door, eyes half closed, but alert enough to notice Claire watching him. She stood and crossed the room, kneeling beside him. Her hand found the familiar place behind his ears, and for the first time in a while, she let herself speak what she had been holding in. "I didn't know I needed you as much as she does." Max leaned into her hand, just slightly. "I thought I was rescuing you," she whispered, "but it turns out, you rescued both of us." He didn't move. He didn't have to. The silence between them was enough. In the months to come, Lily would continue to grow faster now, exploring everything with fearless joy. And through it all, Max would be there. At her side when she stumbled, in her shadow when she wandered, in her memories as her first friend. People often asked Claire if she was ever afraid leaving a baby alone with such a big dog. She always smiled gently, then said the same thing. "I walked in on a moment that changed my heart forever, and I've never doubted them since. Because some love doesn't need explanation. Some bonds don't need words, and some guardians don't wear badges or uniforms. They wear fur and wait by the door. Forever loyal, forever watching, forever hers."